Welcome to the 80s Ladies and Beyond, U.S. Air Force Academy Stories of Humor, Courage, and Determination podcast. I'm your host, Diane Uhas from the class of 1980, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Allison Hilsman Hickey, also from the class of 1980. Together, we share and celebrate the stories of the pioneering women and the men who supported them from the first classes that included women at the United States Air Force Academy. In this podcast, we dive into the real experiences of those early years, the laughter, the challenges, the friendships, and the moments that shaped us. Because these stories aren't just history, they're a legacy, one of courage, resilience, and determination that continues to inspire future generations. So let's get started. Here's another episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond. In this episode, we have the honor and opportunity to talk with two of the Air Training Officers, or ATOs, who were our leaders and role models during our first year at the United States Air Force Academy. Our guests today are Lieutenant General retired Terry Walter Gabreski and Lieutenant Colonel retired Virginia Procino Hartmann. So, Allison, hello, and
Hi.
welcome to our second episode. This is going to be a fun one because these women actually trained us. Are you ready for this episode?
Absolutely. And I will just say, I think you probably remember, Diana, that just over 20 years ago, I was on the class of 1980 gift committee, and we were looking for ways to fund projects that we considered profoundly unique to our class. Among the other programs we ended up doing, which was the peer program and the ethics programs, I suggested that we go back and honor the women ATOs, a lot like the men ATOs in the class of 59 had been honored with a window in Doolittle Hall, in order to capture the history of these wonderful women who were instrumental in the effective integration of women cadets at the Academy. No one had ever done anything like that before. In fact, some of the women, when I would talk to them over time, had told me that they sort of felt like they were just kind of quietly and summarily dismissed, with no fanfare, no acknowledgement. And when I went to go look up in the USAFA history office for the history of the women ATOs, there was literally less than one paragraph that acknowledged they even existed. And so I brought that to the gift committee and said, this is uniquely us. We have to do something about that. And they all unanimously agreed and we set to rectify that situation. I found a commissioned artist that did a lot of work in the Pentagon for memorials and glass etchings, and she was thrilled to do this project. And so now there exists in Doolittle Hall, near the window honoring the first ATOs, the men who brought the first class in 1959, is the women ATOs and all of their names. And we made sure to put, because we have to do it ourselves sometimes, the maiden name and then the married name, just so their story, travels across time. And we even went to creating we had a little bit more money, so we created a display in Arnold Hall so more cadets would have visibility of it. And in that respect, I think right now, just to lead us off, I would just like to name all of those women who show up on that window very quickly. So it was Second Lieutenant Paula A. Gathright Roderick, Second Lieutenant Elizabeth Goolsby Stout, Second Lieutenant Irene L. Graff Rathburn, First Lieutenant Charlotte Green, Second Lieutenant Susan M. Hamilton Wright, Second Lieutenant Yardley L. Nelson Hunter, Second Lieutenant Shirley L. Popper Adeline, Second Lieutenant Virginia Procino Hartmann, Second Lieutenant Catherine L. Sheridan Newton, Second Lieutenant Bonnie Stefan Hampton, Second Lieutenant Rhoda Schweitzer Danforth, Second Lieutenant Terry J. Walter Gabreski. And I may have screwed up the little pronunciation on occasion in some of those names, but they'll just have to tell me to get my chin in and my shoulders back and down again. So that said, I just wanted to say, and we're going to hear from two of those wonderful women and professional Air Force officers that made such a huge difference for us today, and I'm so excited to be part of this. Back to you, Diane.
Let me tell you a little bit about our guests. Terry Walter Gabreski. She is the daughter of retired Air Force Brigadier General Alonzo Walter and the daughter-in-law of World War II and Korean War fighter ace Colonel Gabby Gabreski. After completing Bachelor of Arts degree in history at Louisiana State University, she joined the U.S. Air Force and attended Air Force Officer Training School, where she was commissioned as a second lieutenant in September of 1974. She served as one of the original ATOs charged with mentoring the first female cadets at the United States Air Force Academy. She had a long career in logistics and aircraft maintenance, where she served as a squadron maintenance supervisor for 3 units, commanded 3 maintenance squadrons and a logistics group, and served at the Air Staff, Secretary of the Air Force, and Joint Staff levels. Prior to her final assignment, she served as commander of the Oklahoma City Air Logistics Center at Tinker Air Force Base. She was the vice commander, Air Force Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where she was the second woman to hold the rank of lieutenant general in the United States Air Force. Thank you and welcome. Virginia Procino Hartmann is a lifelong citizen of Watchung, New Jersey. In 1974, Virginia was commissioned as a second lieutenant through officer training school. She became one of the 15 women lieutenants chosen to go to the Air Force Academy to help train the first women to attend the academy. While assigned to McClellan Air Force Base, she served as the manager of the F-111 maintenance scheduling. She then moved on to the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C., where she worked in the NATO division. After having her first child, she joined the reserves and served for 16 years in the Pentagon at Headquarters, U.S. Air Force, as a logistics officer. Post-retirement, she campaigned for 12 years for a new library in her hometown of Watchung. This year, 2026, the 100th anniversary of the founding of Watchung, a new library is under construction. She now serves on the board of directors of the Somerset Hills branch of the American Association of University Women, an organization dedicated to the advancement of women. So welcome both of you to this episode. Okay, let's get started. So it's been 50 years since you started the journey to, break the barrier, allowing women to enter the service academies and, be our mentors and role models. So we want to hear what it was like for you from a first-person perspective. Virginia, or Ginny, you were actually mine and Allison's air training officer in Demon Squadron as basic cadets. And, I got to tell you, I was a little scared of you. I knew you meant business. So you were doing something right back then. But yeah, do you remember us, like us, Allison and I, by any chance?
Absolutely. I've seen Allison a few times over the years. I went to Allison's retirement. And I remember all of the demons. And I loved you guys. And I see you once in a while. When I was still serving in the Air Force, I would run across the class of 80s and demon women in the Pentagon once in a while.
Sure.
But absolutely, I remember all of you.
Yeah, I saw you were assigned to McClellan, but we weren't there the same years, unfortunately, because I was too. That was my first assignment. So yeah, after tech school, but yeah. All right, so let's start with a little bit about about how you heard of the opportunity to even be selected and be an ATO. What was that like? What was that process like for you?
It was not a very long process. I heard about the assignment like in the beginning of December, and I was at the academy in January. But when I first arrived at my assignment at Craig Air Force Base, I was the fuels officer. A field grade woman officer came to Craig. She must have been TDY. And there were only 3 women officers at Craig, and she invited us to lunch. And she was beautiful and smart and so kind to us and helpful. What can I tell you about your career? And we went to the officers club for lunch, and it was a cafeteria kind of situation. And the person on the other side of the food said to me, "Would you like today's special?" And I went, "Yes, whatever. I don't care. All I want to do is listen to what this woman has to say." So we sit down and begin to eat, and I look down, and what is on my plate? Liver and onions. But I don't care. I'm not eating it. It doesn't matter. I just want to listen to this woman. She was wonderful. And about a year later, she called us and told us the Air Force Academy is looking for second lieutenant women who are single and under the age of 27. You guys should apply. Well, one of the three of us was getting married very soon, and the other one was more than 27 years old. She had had other jobs before she joined the Air Force. So it left only me. And so I called, and they gave me an interview appointment right away. They said, go to the Air Force Base photographer, have a full-length picture taken of yourself, and bring your gym clothes for the physical fitness test. Jumped on an airplane. I went. I had an interview with then Colonel McCarthy, later General McCarthy. I only remember two things he said to me. One was that he thought I looked better in real life than my picture. I don't know what to say to that. Thank you. And then he said, no matter how I describe this job, do you realize it's worse? It's going to be bad, very difficult. And I said, yeah, I think so. And, but I promise you I'll do my best. And then someone brought me to the window on the 6th floor of Vandenberg, and they pointed way, way down to the field house. And they said, walk down there and take your physical fitness test. Craig Air Force Base elevation is like 16 feet. So I start walking, and I get about halfway down those 200 steps, whatever it is. And I'm out of breath, and I'm going downhill, and I'm like really worried. This is not very hard to do, and yet I'm out of breath. But anyway, I went down there, and I did my very best, even though it was really difficult. I felt like I didn't get any air, but you get one try. That's it. And then I flew home the next day back to Craig, and I coughed for a week because of that cold, dry air, which in Alabama it's warm and wet. And within a week or two, they said, you're hired. And less than a month after that, I was in Colorado. So it was a very fast. I don't know when the other ones were hired, but I was towards the end.
Wow, that is a story. So is it true, did ATOs have also, besides the age requirement, have to be single?
That was the goal. Now, Shirley was married, but her husband was remote. So it's like she would never see him. So I guess they thought that was close enough to single.
Okay.
I think that's all. The age and the single was maybe to be more relatable.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Young women.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks. Terry, let's bounce it over to you. Let's hear your perspective. How did you hear about it? What was the process like, etc.?
Yeah, I was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base as an avionics maintenance officer, and I was looking forward. I had done a tour when we brought the Vietnamese refugees back to the U.S. I had done a tour to be one of the first 3 people to start their camp. That was our Air Force camp. And so I was looking forward beyond my avionics maintenance squadron, and I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. Dad had been an AOC in the mid-60s. I went to 5th, 6th, and 7th grade there. And so I knew I wanted to go there. But every time I went to what we used to call CBPO, they would say, oh, well, you have to have a master's degree or a PhD, and you got to be a major. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. And I ended up, Colonel McCarthy had worked with my dad as an AOC, so I just called him up. He didn't know me from Adam. I said, hi, sir. you don't know me, but I just have a question. And I explained who I was. And he goes, yeah, what do you want to know? And I said, I want to be stationed at the Air Force Academy. And I told him what I just told you all. And he goes, boy, did you call at the exact right time. He says, and he told me that, they were starting the program just as you described it, and asked me to come out for an interview. So I did, and it was a very interesting interview because, it was like Ginny's, but I mean, he says, you can call me Jim, and I'm a second lieutenant, right? And I'm looking at him going, no, sir, okay, you passed that test. And I was like, and he looked at me, he said, how's your love life? And I was like, I don't have one. He says, perfect. So, it was a kind of a broad ranging interview, and I went home, and the good news is I got to be assigned to the Air Force Academy.
Wow. That's just like amazing. And, thank you so much. That had to be kind of bizarre to have somebody ask you some of those questions. Yeah.
Not back in the day. I mean,
That's true. Yeah. I remember a few questions that were a little.
I mean, that's when you got pregnant, you had to get out of the Air Force. So asking how your love life is by far not, out of
They're just like
the box kind of thing.
Right. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, so that got you up to arriving at the Air Force Academy to start going through. They wanted to put you through the experiences of the training elements that we would be going through. So again, we could relate. You would understand what we were going through, and Janine, now I understand why you knew why I was always out of breath was okay, because I now know you had experienced that. So thanks for sharing that. But so Terry, tell me a little bit about your training experience when you got there on the ground. What they put you through. What were your reactions to it? How did you feel like that related to your ability to then bring us on into our training programs? Just tell me a little bit about the training that you went through and what you thought of that, and especially as it either stayed the same or made some changes when we came in.
Yeah, no. From January of 1976 to June, when you guys got there, they put us through BCT, basic cadet training, just like cadets did. We were owned by a cadet cadre. They took away everything except our rank. We were allowed to wear our rank, but for all intents and purposes, we were basic cadets. All of us except one ATO, Susan, got our hair chopped off, and we lived in the dorms. They took our BAQ and our BAH, and we lived in Vandenberg Hall and did everything basic cadets would do. And we went to Jacks Valley, we did SAMIs, we did IRIs, we called minutes, we did shower formations, we did Siri. That was interesting because one of your questions, Allison, is, what were cadets' reactions? And again, we were there to absorb any hatred and all of that because there was a lot of that going around. And since we lived between 1st and 2nd Squadron, we were frequently had cadets peek in, and this was when we were about to go on the trek for Siri, and guy stuck his head in and he said, I thought you guys were going on the trek to Siri. And I said, oh yeah, we're doing that by correspondence. And I mean, that afternoon, that was all over the cadet wing, and Colonel McCarthy called us and he says, somebody started a rumor that you guys were doing this by. I said, sir, you should find that person and punish them. So yeah, we did everything that basics would do. That march to Mitch's, got oinked and mooed at by cadets changing classes. It was, and for me, I kind of knew what to expect since my dad had been an AOC and a group AOC, so I didn't find anything onerous. Like Jenny, we all kind of, struggled with the athletic part, and then when you guys got there, our roles changed. We were back to being officers, didn't have a cadre. We were assigned to specific cadet squadrons and were advisors. But in the end, I guess you guys have used the word mentors. We were assigned to be surrogate upperclassmen and role models. And one of the big things about putting us through BCT was to actually have you guys be able to see people that had survived all of this that looked like you.
Mhm.
So that was our goal. And then when you guys got there and we were advising, cadets training you during your beast, it was like, people go, what do you do when a girl cries? What do you do when a guy cries? Because guys cry during BCT. When we make them stop, let's go over there and make her stop. I mean, so kind of common sense stuff. So that's pretty much the experience. And I enjoy is not the right word. I thought it was just a awesome experience.
So, we came in with the benefit of 157 of us surrounding us and the benefit of, the 12 of you. I think it was 12, maybe, was it 13 or 12?
Well, 15 of us started. 12 of us actually did the
Yeah,
job.
that's true. There was 3 that did not come into the final mix. So that 12 of you hit it briefly, but you kind of then moved on to the story. But I remember distinctly, even after we got there, that you all took a fair amount of abuse. The fact that you got oinked. I never got oinked. I got some other bad things, but never oinked.
Well, and hopefully we help mitigate that.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Our stating was, just for sort of the historical capture, is that you all did and absorbed things that we did not then have to, that part of it explicitly absorb in the raw format. You took some of the sting out, is what I would say. So, Jenny, same question. What was your experience, some of your memories of the training or profound moments of the training, your thoughts?
Oh, like Terry said, I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was so rewarding. And when we got a lot of pretty ugly cat calls or whatever, we talked about it and said, remember, this is not for us. This is to absorb some of that venom and get it out of their system. Although it didn't, of course, completely. But, get some of that out of the way. Some of the things I wanted to mention was we did a lot of airmanship programs, which was very nice. We did classroom navigation, and then we got in an airplane and navigated from one base to another. We did a lot of soaring, a lot. We did I went in a hot air balloon. I mean, you don't get to do that when you're fuels officer, that's for sure. And we did all of the confidence course, the assault course, the obstacle course. We did all that so that we could be credible role models for you. And we did some weightlifting, and we went to Jack's Valley and did Siri, but we did it when it was cold. It was really cold. And I really wanted to be believable, a believable role model that we did this, you can do it. Nobody died, Oh, funny story. A graduate of the first class came to talk to us once in the kind of a meeting room in the dormitory. And he mentioned the original ATOs. He was telling us about them, the men. And he had said that one of them died.
Hmm.
And I went, wait a minute, how dangerous is this going to be? It turned out it was unfortunately a flying accident. So, I mean, that happens in the Air Force, but was really the greatest experience. And Siri, I think especially, was very, very good for us, and we learned so much. And I remember to this day, we have this joke in my family. We were out in the woods somewhere, and we're building these tents made out of parachutes. It's raining, and our uniforms, they're like wicking the water. So it's going up our fatigue pants little by little, gets past our knees. It's awful. It's cold and it's wet, and people are grumbling a little bit. And the trainer said, oh, well, if you're feeling unhappy, it's because you're not hydrated enough. And so now when like really terrible things are going on and somebody says, oh, this is horrible. Well, you're probably not drinking enough water. That's the only reason you feel bad. But I think the training was pretty accurate and pretty comprehensive. Of course, it's not the same, not exactly the same. It never could be, but it was, I think, close enough to make us credible.
And I had not known that you all had done as much the airmanship work as that. And I wonder, back of my head, I always believe there's never anything done by accident. There's always some purpose to it. And probably since we knew later on, within a year or so, they would be bringing even one of the ATOs into pilot training again and start opening up pilot training again to women.
More
Perhaps
than
they were
one.
doing a little assessment at the same time. Somebody was probably studying that in some back room somewhere.
Can assure you, when I did AM 490, and I was the first woman to get AM 490 wings, and when I landed the first time, the vice commandant met me on the ground. He says, "Wow," he says, "we weren't even sure you would make it." And I was just like, "Good news." So yeah, I'm sure they were checking us all out. But like Jenny said, I mean, all those airmanship programs when we got on that T-43 and went to Mather, I mean, even when we did our laying out in the sun in our bikinis, waiting for underneath our flight suits, waiting for the plane to take us back. But yeah, the whole process, I think, was very well planned out.
We heard a little bit on the previous episode about all the planning that went into this effort, which is substantially different than what they did at the other major service academies, which they were doing a lot of no, 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 no till the very bitter end, and even then beyond that, they were not jumping in with the full weight of we're going to make this succeed like the Air Force Academy did. So we understood even that you all were part of that really good planning effort. And it was an intentional thing to bring you all in to be leaders for us. So with that said, on the training, let me pass it over to you, Diane, to take the next set of questions focused on beyond the initial training.
Yeah, so thank you. Jenny, everything you just described, really now, 50 years later, I understand why you guys did instill a sense of you can do this because you did it, and that is what the Air Force was intending. Wow. So no, it was, my opinion, very effective. Yeah. So we kind of touched on some of this already, but so once all of your training was complete and then you transitioned into training us, I just was wondering how that worked. Were you all involved in, any of the planning or decision-making, et cetera? How did that kind of work? How were you assigned to basic cadet squadrons or eventually cadet squadrons? Jenny, let's start with you.
We were not involved. We were said, you will go on A and you will be on B. And I was in D for demons. We had no input as far as I know. There was no, Bonnie offered to switch with me. And she said, you don't want to work with Tommy Hartmann. He says, he's terrible. It would be awful, but I know him and it would be okay if we'll just swap. And I said, I've never met this guy, but I know if we swap, somebody will get in trouble. I said, I don't need any trouble. I said, no, I can do it, And so we met June 27th, 1976, almost 50 years ago. And we'll be married 50 years next year. So that worked out.
Yeah. And they said it wouldn't last.
I have no complaints with however they arranged where we were put. I really liked the summertime in that, you were all together on the 6th floor and even in the beginning of the academic year. And I felt that really helped you bond with each other. But when they sent you off to your individual squadrons, I was very happy about that. You were ready, and there was some information that was getting lost. They would forget. We forgot to tell the women in our squadron that we're not meeting at 6, we're going to meet at 5. And, they would forget. And that's really bad. So after you were sent to your individual squadrons, I really felt that most of our work was done, and I was happy. I was happy for that. Great. It's like, the birds leaving the nest. You need to get out there and do it. And Tom says that, people say there was a lot of resentment against women and stuff like that. But he said that once women were in the squadron, he really felt like, they're part of the squadron. We need to get this done. Of course, they're part of the effort to get it done. He didn't see any of that personally. But had, I think those are all my thoughts on you getting integrated into the squadrons. I thought it was all good news. Put us out of a job. In fact, some of the ATOs left. Shirley and Irene and who else? They went to pilot training, and Beth Goolsby became a navigator. And it was okay because you were already on your way.
Yeah.
You didn't need us so much.
Yeah, that was almost like you said, like birds leaving the nest. It was kind of a natural evolution, right? Yeah, progression.
I think so.
Thank you. Terry, how about your perspective on that whole business?
I stayed pretty involved with the cadet squadrons I was assigned to, and by the way, during Beast, I was the Bearcat ATO. So, and several of my Bearcats came to the 50th event, so I was excited to see them. But no, I felt like when it was very important to transition you all into your squadrons because there was all kind of rumors rampant in the cadet wing that you guys were getting special treatment. You weren't having to do the same stuff as everyone else. So the important part was to put you in the squadron where they could see you're getting all the same good deals and bad deals as everyone else. And that was one of our jobs, was when you were living on the 6th floor, was to make sure you did get all the good deals and bad deals. And no, I thought that was an important transition. But no, I stayed involved. I was ATO for 14th Squadron and then 35th Squadron, so I was Wild Weasel. Went to their squadron meetings and answered questions, and so I thought that was an important part of our follow-on role. That again, we're back to being officers and advisors, and I thought that was good that they had assigned us specific squadrons as well. So, and I left on of
77.
Yeah. So went to SOS. So,
Wow.
and again, our job was to work ourselves out of a job. And once you guys were upperclassmen, then we moved on.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Pretty much, I guess, the same type of roles, right, that the male ATOs played, but this was on a smaller scale. Yeah.
I would add one thing. I was the cheerleading sponsor, and so I got to go to West Point when we play with our cheerleaders. And exactly what Allison was saying, what I observed there is their women, they were wearing their mess dress skirts wrong with the slits down the front. They had,
Oh.
they didn't have any idea of how to integrate. I felt really bad for them. Yeah. And by virtue of the fact that the Air Force Academy had the lowest attrition rate of women,
Cool.
I mean, I like to think that had something to do with us being there and you guys being able to identify with us. So yeah, I felt really bad for the women that I saw and talked to at West Point.
Yeah, that makes, that
Forgotten you were our cheerleading person. Well, thank you for that. That was one of my places that I went to just go be normal.
exactly. All right, Allison, go ahead. Next.
So we talked a little bit about some of this, but I think this is sort of a summary conversation that, as you've been reflecting back over 50 years, and I know you've had a chance specifically in relation to the 50-year anniversary and some of the other events you've come back and attended with our class. So what When you reflect back on the sort of historic significance of what happened and the important role, a part you played in it, how does that make you feel? And if you could point to one of your funniest or favoriteest or worst or scariest, you pick one of those or all of those memories that, you think about more than once, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Terry.
Yeah, I think in my mind, one of the biggest challenges was the attitude of the cadet wing. But I think most of us sort of, we knew that's what we were there for. We shrugged it off, addressed it with humor, like the whole we're doing Siri by correspondence thing. And so that was a challenge, but we knew that's why we were there. One of the reasons. And I did not feel pressure to succeed. We were having the opportunity to do all kind of awesome stuff we would have never gotten to do as women in the Air Force at that time. I guess one of the more interesting things, we had a media day. We were all lined up and the press could talk to us and ask us questions. And this was early in our assignment. And one of the reporters stood up and said, "I'd like to ask Miss Walter, is it Miss or Mrs.?" And I just looked at him and I said, "It's Lieutenant." And everybody went, "Ooh," because they're not used to using our rank. They're more worried about, is it Miss or Mrs.? And we ended up doing a lot of those kind of things to sort of turn people's thinking around, that women in the military, it was more than just about being married or whatever. So yeah, I guess I didn't have any scary situations. Oh, well, except when we were doing the POW camp, one of the football players grabbed me by my BDUs and slammed me up against the wall and I couldn't breathe. So I had to call an academic situation. And, so, and it's that kind of thing, the men getting used to, just, you could do that to a guy maybe, but we were a little bit lighter and smaller. Yeah, nothing traumatic at all. I don't wake up at night shaking for any reason because of being an ATO.
Great. And Ginny, your thoughts, same question, sort of what, the difference it made, historical significance when you think about that, and then any one of those four categories or all of them.
I didn't treat really the air training officer assignment any differently than I had my other assignments. I didn't feel any particular pressure. I mean, you get a job in the Air Force, you go in there prepared to do your very best, right? You do it every day, you show up. I was never sick. I was never injured. I showed up every day and did my best. I think a funny occasion that illustrates the attitude still of men was when we were in prisoner of war camp. Someone is supposed to try to escape. So we had this plan that we would stage this horrible fight. The ATOs would roll around on the ground and pretend to beat each other up, and this would provide a distraction. And then Paula, she's like 5'11", and she would boost me over this wall and I would escape. And it all went according to plan. There they are rolling around in the dirt, pretending to kill each other. And someone told me later that they were convinced this was true. I guess women, you put them in this situation, they go nuts. They start killing each other, And, but anyway, I escape, and then they couldn't figure out who was missing. Which one is gone? Like, we were sometimes this blob of people, they couldn't discriminate who was who, they were just all those women, But anyway, I went to this building you were supposed to go to, and my reward was supposed to be a donut. I was looking forward to it, frankly, and I got there and I said, "So, here I am, where's my donut?" And they said, "Well, you guys, you took so long to escape and all that, we ate them all." I said, really? They offered me a piece of white, like Wonder Bread. I said, no, thank you. No, it's my donut or nothing. But I thought that the fact that they swallowed that fight, hook, line, and sinker,
Yeah.
and they couldn't quite figure out who was missing, I think that tells you a lot about some of the attitudes that were rampant at the time.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you all thought creatively. It reminds me of other things in my career where somebody said a woman couldn't do something, and two women put their heads together and did it. you know, so that's some pretty good stories and some pretty good memories that we can hold on to as we continue this dialogue. Back over to you, Diane. You're going to ask a question I really want to hear, so let me let you ask it.
All right. Thank you, Allison. So, and first of all, wow, that story is just brilliant that you guys faked a fight and you were able to escape. I mean, what a great series story. One of the best I've heard. So, Jenny, let's start with you. So, what advice would you give yourself as a new ATO with all of the perspective that you have now?
Well, Tom and I talk about this a lot. I say something like, well, if I had taken that assignment and become a fuels officer in Panama, I never would have gone to the Air Force Academy. And then we probably never would have met.
Right.
Our children wouldn't be born, all this. And he goes, stop. You live one life. You can't go back. What happened, happened. If you don't like what happened, you could maybe change your method of doing things in the future. But as far as, advice I would give myself, I really didn't overthink that assignment. They said, you're going to go there and do difficult things, physically mostly, I guess a little mentally. But like Terry, I never was alarmed at anything. I don't have nightmares. Although when we were out there doing something and we were supposed to get this wonderful present, which was a helicopter ride, and Shirley was in the front seat and I was in the back seat. No doors, on the helicopter. And the pilot said, oh, you're going to have the thrill of your life. I'm going to do this terrain following thing where you just barely miss the treetops and everything. And there's a reason I wasn't a pilot. I don't like that. And Shirley was having such a wonderful time. She was enjoying herself. And I thought, you're just going to have to hang in there. This is like awful, but don't say anything and ruin her good time, But, advice, no, I don't think I needed any advice. You go in there, you do your best every day. I wouldn't change anything. I think one of the questions you might were thinking of asking was, would you do it again? Yes, absolutely. It's one of the highlights of my life. I would do it tomorrow again, except, of course, physically I wouldn't be able to keep up anymore. But it wasn't like, it's like a person climbing Mount Everest or something. Did you have fun? Well, no, you didn't have fun, but it was a good accomplishment. You feel good about yourself. You feel proud, That's how I feel about the ATO experience, that it's a great experience. And yes, I would do it again. No advice.
Yes, thank you. No, I have lots of similar feelings, I think. So, yeah. So, Terry, how about you? What advice, if any, would you give yourself as a new ATO?
Yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I guess if any advice, I would say, try to take advantage of more of the experiences, although they didn't actually give us a choice. But maybe after we got done doing VCT stuff, maybe during the year, because obviously we had no job. You guys were going to class. We didn't have classes to go to, so we had some time. And maybe I think I would have approached General McCarthy and the gang to see if there was other stuff that we could do as long as we were there. So I would do it in a heartbeat. I would go back to the POW camp. One of the least happy parts of that for me is, which they couldn't do today, is I was the camp commandant's whore. And so that was to put me up in front of the ATOs thinking I was getting special treatment so that the ATOs would not be happy with me or whatever. But I mean, just to be able to see those kind of situations where they could never do that today. And that's a good thing. So no specific words other than see if I could do more during the school year after we finished our beast stuff.
So I know, General Gabreski, you were just back there talking to that almost 1,000 women who have graduated over the last 50 years. So you will probably have a fresh perspective on this. But I know, Jenny, you've been back and forth with us enough to probably have a similar fresh perspective. But one, were you surprised at how few women beyond about 80 and 81 knew anything about ATOs? And that you even existed for us? And two, what was it like to see all those women? And by the way, they've gotten better at the physical fitness stuff in big ways. Oh my gosh, I look at all of these athletes, women athletes that are just rocking the socks off of intercollegiate athletics everywhere. And your thoughts on seeing all of those long blue line, that unique long blue line, but also the reaction to what's an ATO?
Well, I was thrilled to see the turnout for that event and the classes getting together, you guys, getting together with your classmates. I thought that was just wonderful. I thought the event was so well put together. I really enjoyed that you guys made us a part of it. And during the memorial ceremony, Irene and I were there and we stood for our ATOs that have passed on. And so it was just an outstanding event. I was horrified's kind of a strong word, maybe, at how few people beyond the class of 81 had any idea there was such thing as an ATO, what that was. And it has nothing to do with, us feeling offended. It's more like we were a piece of that history, and the fact that people beyond 81, maybe 82, had no idea what an ATO was, even back to the male ATOs. So, yeah, that was disturbing to me, and we sent them. Anytime people, especially after I sat on that panel and we had to discuss my Form 10, people would come up to me and Irene and ask us, about it, and we sent them over to the display in Arnold Hall. So, A, go look at that display, and B, your homework assignment is to figure out which ones are us. So, but yeah, the short answer to your question, I know we're too late for that, is I was astounded.
So Jenny, I know you didn't get to see firsthand it was just a phenomenal event with 50 years of women who have attended the Service Academy. But take my word for it and her word for it, it was it was just awesome. But my question, you've been back since and you've seen all of the subsequent classes, and do you ever sort of sit back and go, man, I started something cool?
I love the fact that I was an ATO. If anybody else knows about it, that's okay. But it was a good program. The Air Force did a good job, and I'm happy and proud that I was part of it. It's true, Allison, what you said about women's athletics today. All athletes are just bigger, stronger, faster than they used to be. But the class of 80 had all-American athletes. That's pretty good. The first time women are ever in an institution to reach that level. So I wouldn't minimize the athleticism that your class had either. I went to the 45th reunion brunch that the 80s women always have after their reunions. And there were quite a few people there. Maybe 4 or 5 ATOs were there. And people briefly introduced themselves, said about their careers, and after what they were doing since they retired. I have never been in a room of such remarkable women in my life. Not only did they have great careers, but after they left, stupendous examples of volunteering in their towns and states and federally, doing wonderful things for women and everybody else. The Air Force Academy must be doing something right because they were just a whole room full of remarkable people. Not just nice women, good mothers, good workers, whatever, just remarkable, off the scale. And to have been even a small part of that, to help that along, it's nothing but make me happy. It's a great thing.
Great. Great. And that's a bit of the experience we were having in that bubble of just amazing women here a couple weekends ago. So, Diane, back over to you to close us out, I think.
Yes, thank you. Well, I just want to thank everyone here. Terry and Jenny, thanks so much for your time and sharing the stories and the perspectives and the history of the ATOs at the Air Force Academy. Does anyone have any closing comments?
You know, I would like to mention that when we arrived, the class of 1976 was about to graduate. That was only the 18th class to ever graduate from the Air Force Academy. The institution was nearly brand new, and they did such a great job of integrating women. You know, part of that, I'm not sure if it's true, but it's always been my opinion. I think part of that was because the Air Force Academy did not have the burden of 200 or more years of tradition, and you're messing with that. You know, you're wrecking the long traditions what we've had. You're throwing a wrench in that. Whereas the Air Force is our newest branch of military. It's our newest academy. And now we have cadets who go into the Space Command. I think because they're younger and a newer institution, that this helps them. This helps them with new programs. It makes them more eager to start new things.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, they weren't entrenched in their ways back in the 70s. Terry, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I guess I would just say we haven't discussed it, but I think as an ATO, I also developed a kinship with the men in the class of 80. And I came across them throughout my career, and they were always very kind and supportive and thrilled with having ATOs there, which we interfaced, I guess, once we got to their cadet squadrons as much with them as we did with the women. And I felt like they're kind of the unsung heroes of the whole thing because you guys got all the focus, and rightly so. But those guys had to put up with the same baloney. They were getting the same kind of stuff, and they had nothing to do with it. They just showed up and processed. So I just want to give kudos to the men in the class of 80.
Terry, that's a really great point and something we've had a lot of conversation about. And Diane, I think we should look for a podcast that features a couple of them to tell the story from their side.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be having some of our classmates on.
Well, my sincere thanks. I did not expect, 50, 51 years later that the two women that I thought were the hardest, toughest ATOs on the block are now dear, sweet, compassionate. And I learned a little something about General Gabreski I did not know before after the 50th reunion. But all is good. All is great. You were going to say something, Terry.
I think I was just going to say, aside from the men in the class of 80, I think it's important to bring them on, and the other people that might be of interest are the boys in LCWB class of 79, and get them to give them perspective. I pinned on one of their classmates to Brigadier General when I was on active duty. Then he had a bunch of classmates in there, and I just looked in my remarks. I said, I was there with you guys with the ATOs, and man, we finished that in a year and a half. What took you guys so long? And that did not go over well as a comment. But anyway, that would be an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, golden. Okay, well, thank you so much. I am going to wrap it up. So in our next episode, we will begin talking to our classmates to hear their unique stories of applying for, entering, and spending their 4 years or so at the Air Force Academy. So look forward to that good episode coming up. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond Air Force Academy stories of humor, courage, and determination. We hope these stories inspired you, just as living them inspired us. Be sure to follow, share, and join us next time as we continue celebrating the legacy of the women who helped shape the Academy's history.